discuss. So let us bow our heads as we pray. Heavenly Father, we thank you for this opportunity to speak and to share in this breakout room. And we pray that you will shed light into our minds so that our journey will be easier to understand going forward, guided by you. This we pray in the name of Jesus. Amen. So the topic of today is called Speaking from the Heart. And what I want to do is, um, while I'm speaking, if you have any questions, simply unmute yourself and ask the question live. That way, you won't have to save them up until the end, and then we can continue a dialogue all the way through. So I'm talking about fostering healthier relationships with your children. So let me tell you a little bit about myself. Um, I grew up in a family of 8 children. So with my mum and dad, there were 10 of us in the house. And I'm an adult. I'm 58 years old. And I have 2 adult children of my own who have already grown up and left home. Um, I've been in the ministry working as a pastor and counselor for about 33 years. Sorry, for 23 years. And I've been married for 33 years. Um, so as we talk, feel free to share, feel free to ask your questions, and we will dialogue together. So fostering healthier relationships with your children. So first and foremost, when we're talking about healthier relationships with our children, we need to firstly enable our children to know that we love them. It's not enough to love our children. We need to be able to communicate that love to them. Think about your own childhood and how love from your parents was communicated to you. And you can share that in a moment. So when you have children, if you love them, which I hope you do, you will want to communicate that love that you have to your children. And the funny thing is, each child is different. And if you communicate love to one child in one way, that same love will not feel like love to the other child. Let me give you an example. I only have 2 children, and one of them needs hugs from me all the time. So whenever she's with me, she'll just walk up to me and hug me. And she'll stay there for about a minute, just close to me. That's the kind of love she needs. She's a very tactile, touchy-feely type of person. And as long as she feels hugged and warm and close, she'll be good to go, and off she will go and enjoy her life. Whenever she visits and comes home, she comes straight to me for another hug. That's the way she is. My other child, however, doesn't like hugs at all. But she likes little gifts instead. So whenever I travel away or go to another country, she likes me to send her a little token, something from that country. It doesn't need to be expensive, but just something that says, I remembered you when I was traveling. And so I recognize that even if you love 2 people or more with the same amount of love, sometimes you have to show that love to each one in a different way for them to feel loved. And if you want to develop a good relationship with your children, first of all, they need to feel loved by you. And there are 5 basic ways in which we feel love. We feel loved by gifts. When someone loves us, they give us gifts. And I'm not talking about expensive things. I'm just talking about tokens, which means like when I was not with you, I was thinking about you. So suppose I went to the shop to buy some food, and while I was at that shop, I noticed something in the shop that one of my daughters would like, and I bring it home for them. That little gift means when I was not with you, I was thinking about you. You know, there's a saying which says, out of sight, out of mind. And there's another counter saying which says, absence makes the heart grow fonder. And gifts is one way of communicating love. A second way of communicating love is acts of service. That is to help someone. So our children go through all kinds of struggles and difficulties in their life, both physical and emotional and academic. And at different stages of their life, they need help. And sometimes they don't want to ask for help. But if we love them and we are attentive to their needs, we will notice when they are struggling, and we will instinctively offer them help at the times when they need it. It's the same in relationships with husbands and wives. You know, there's something about receiving help from somebody that you don't have to ask for, because they love you, they observe what you're doing, they notice your struggle, and they see it and feel it. So they offer to help you because they are connected with you. And there's something about the spontaneity of that that makes it feel like a loving act. So that's acts of service. And then the third one is words of affirmation. This is where you affirm somebody, you recognize what they're doing and show genuine appreciation for it. You acknowledge their success and their contribution to your life. You thank them for who they are and what they do, and you celebrate their achievements with them as if they are your own achievements, and their happiness becomes your happiness. And you say, well done, and you don't hold back to give each other acknowledgement for the hard work that you do. For some, that is love. You know, for me, that's one of the things that makes me feel loved. When I do a good piece of work and my wife or my children say, that was well done, that was really good. That makes me feel good for at least a week, you know. So there's words of affirmation. And then there is, you know, physical touch, you know, the warm affection. Some people just feel loved if you touch them and hold them. And if you don't hold them or touch them, no matter how many gifts or help or affirmation, they don't feel until you hold them. And then the fifth one is quality time. This is where you give someone your full attention. And, you know, when you set aside some time for them, you don't allow anything else to interrupt that time. You just give them that time. So the worst thing you can do for somebody for whom quality time is important is make an agreement to meet with them at a certain time. And then when that time comes, you cancel it because of some other reason. Somebody gives you a phone call and you say, oh, can we change it? That it is like saying somebody else's needs are more important to me than you. So quality time. And quality time is a particular type of time. This is where you make time to listen to someone and to share their life with them in a non-judgmental way. You know, some of us as parents, when we're dealing with our children, we struggle with this one because the moment we start to listen to them, we start to judge what we are hearing and we start to weigh up whether it is right or wrong or whether they're doing good or bad. And before they finish, we want to start advising and start instructing. But quality time for young people means the ability to listen to their full story without judging them, without contradicting them, without showing shock at anything they may say. Because the moment you say shock, they stop. And some young people, they want to tell their parents difficult things, things that shock them or upset them or frighten them. And they don't know if you can take it, if you can cope with what they've got to say. So they tell you something slightly less than what they want to say to begin with, just to see how you can manage. And if you are shocked, they close down. And what they really wanted to say, they will never say it. So if you're going to commit to quality time, you need to pray for the ability to prepare yourself for that so that you will be non-judgmental, you will be able to listen without being shocked, and you'll be able to enter into their experience from their point of view, true empathy. So when you're dealing with young people, they need to know, to feel that you love them, either through gifts or help or words of affirmation or physical affection or quality time or all five. And then when they feel loved, they are more likely to be able to open up to you and share their life with you. Now, as children are growing up, they have many basic needs. And before I go further, I want you to speak to me. Um, Tell me from your life as you are now, as an adult, what makes you feel loved? What kind of behavior makes you feel loved? Is it gifts? Is it when someone helps you? Is it words of affirmation? Is it physical touch? Is it quality time? What makes you feel loved? You can unmute and answer me if you wish.
And
Gregory.
for me, growing up, it was quality time. Quality time was my love language. Yeah, and that was different
Wonderful.
for me and my sister.
And it's interesting that each person has a different way of receiving love.
Yeah.
Wonderful. Thank you. And well, you see, um, these languages of love have two sides, because we have the type of love that we instinctively want to give, but there's also a type of love that we instinctively like to receive. And sometimes they are different. Because if I love someone, I instinctively want to give them gifts. But my children who love me, they instinctively want to give me different things. So one child wants to give me hugs, the other child wants to give me compliments. So we need to be aware of what we want to give and what we love to receive. And even if there is a certain type of love we love to give, we still need to look at the child carefully and say, is that what they need? And a good way of finding out what type of love the children need is to show all the five different types of love to them at different times and see which ones they respond to the most. And then you can spend more time focusing on those. So when children feel loved, that gives them a basic starting point. Anyone else would like to share with me what makes you feel loved?
Um, Personally, as a child, I liked when my father spent time with me because I came from a big family.
Yes.
So that little time alone with him made it special. Because my mother passed away when I was small. So that attention from my father meant a lot to me. And as a result, up to today, when I tell people about my relationship with God, I tell them that it stems from my relationship I had with my father, because he was such a loving father. But over the years, it kind of changed. Now I'm a mother and a grandmother, and it has changed. Right as of now, somebody noticing when I'm struggling with something and doing something about it means more to me than quality time, because quality time is okay, but just noticing me struggle with something and doing something about it shows me that you care.
Right, thank you. And that's really important, because the type of love we need varies according to our life circumstances. And it's interesting because I do not actually know why different children start off in different places, why some want one more than the other. I suppose it's the fact that they are different, just like they have different personalities. Like I have two children, and when they were young, I was trying to figure out the best way to discipline them when they misbehaved. And so one of the ideas was I would tell them to go into a corner of the room, turn their face to the corner, and think about their behavior. And when they're finished thinking, come back out of the corner and explain to me their thoughts. And one child would go into the corner and she would think for a while and she'd come back out and repent and explain to me what she did and apologize. The other child would go into the corner, spend a long time in the corner, and then she'd come out and say she forgot why she was in the corner. And no change had taken place. So the same thing that works for one completely failed to work for the other. And so I just have to acknowledge the fact that they were just different and start from where they were.
Yes, as you were saying, something dawned on me that one of my children, just my looking at that particular one, ordinary looking, not hitting, not doing anything, meant something to them.
Yes.
Like when I went to the store with them, all I needed to do was just snap my hand like this, and they know what I'm talking about.
Yes.
But the other ones, you know, quite different.
Yes.
It kind of, you know, shows me also how God our Father deals with each and every one of us. We are all so different, and yet God Himself deals with us according to the way, you know, He sees that we will benefit more. Instead of using the same measurement for everybody. God does not use the same measurement for everybody, although the underlining is the same, you know, what He wants to do. Yes.
Oh, I was wanting to talk about how we express love.
Yes, go ahead.
Yeah. So for me, I found growing up, I enjoyed when my parents gave me gifts, and I asked for them, because gifts were not very common, you know, growing up in Africa.
Yeah.
You know, if you want something, you ask for it and hoping that you'll get it. You might get it, you might not. So, and also I enjoyed good food, you know, parents cooking good food and just spending time with them.
Amen.
Yeah. So growing up, I enjoyed. I found that when I wanted to, you know, show someone I like them, I buy them a gift.
Yes.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. And yeah, and my wife will say something.
Oh, I understand love through quality time.
Wonderful, thank you. And it's interesting because sometimes relationships between spouses and parents and children break down because this understanding of different types of manifestations of love is not understood. I'll give you an example. I was working with a married couple who had been married for a number of years, and they called me because they said they were not happy with their marriage. They had everything. They were quite a wealthy couple. And so I sat down with both of them together to hear what they had to say. And the man started, and he said, you know, this woman is so ungrateful. Every single thing that she could ever wish for, I have given it to her. I've given her a house. We go on holidays 3 times a year. Anywhere in the world she wants to go, I buy her a car, and I change the car every 3 years, brand new. And I gave her money. I told her to go and study. She doesn't have to worry about money, pursue any career she wants. Anything she wants, I give it to her. And she says she's not happy. You know, he was so annoyed. And it sounded like a fair case. You know, this woman is so ungrateful. But then I said to the lady, okay, please speak. And then she made one sentence which showed what the problem was. She said, what is the purpose of having a brand new car if you are always in that car by yourself? And then I realized his way of showing love was gifts. So he was always away working, earning more and more and more money so that he could give her things. But the love that she needed was quality time. And that was in short supply. So if what she needed, she didn't receive, and what she received, she didn't need, then she would feel unloved. And so I was able to explain this to them. And when he realized that it wasn't ingratitude he was dealing with, but that he was communicating with her in a love language different from what her heart needed. And as a result of that, they were able to make some changes, and they settled down and became very happy and continued with their life, which was a very good life. So just sometimes a little understanding can make a whole lot of difference. When dealing with young people, it's good to understand their needs and your needs at the same time, because all of us once were young ourselves, and we are all products of our childhood. And looking a little bit about child development will help us to understand ourselves and our children at the same time. So when we are growing up, when children are growing up, we have 4 basic needs. Need number 1 is a need for attachment. Need number 2 is the needs for freedom and autonomy. And I'll explain these further. Need number 3 is for spontaneity and play. And need number 4 is realistic, safe boundaries. And if all of those things are met in proportion, then the child grows up feeling safe and secure and able to thrive. And as we are growing up, as we were growing up when we were children, we can look back and we can feel the effects on our adult life if some of these things were missing. So let's look at the first one, attachment. You know, when a baby cries, they need to know that somebody will respond and eventually pick them up. When a child lifts its arms, they need to know that not every time, but sometimes when they lift their arms, somebody will touch them and somebody will lift them. You know, when children are afraid, they need to know that somebody is there to comfort them. You know, somebody is there for me. I am not alone in this world. You know, it's almost like the core of loneliness is when you are attached to no one, when no one needs you and no one notices you and you are all alone. And the worst thing that can happen to a child growing up is to feel detached, to feel that they have no one in their corner, they're all alone in this world. Because then the world feels like a very frightening place. And if a child grows up with this lack of attachment, they will learn to cope without attachment. And then that will affect parts of their adult life. I see a hand. Yes, speak on, unmute yourself so I can hear you.
Okay. Now, in this age where everything is electronic.
Yes.
I was watching a program one day, somebody said that they have about 4 televisions in their house, or even 5 in their house. Wow. So every room in the house, including the kitchen, had a television. So how do parents break out of that to be able to get that attachment?
That's a very good question, because there's a lot of competition now for the child's attention. Yes. All these televisions, the mobile phones with all their social media on them, and especially the boys, they have their PlayStations, and many of them are online, connected with other people all the way around the world. And they're so busy and so caught up. How do you attach to them? Well, the original question is, the best way to attach is before these things even come into their life, when they're very, very young, and maintain those attachments all the way through their life. But suppose you were busy and you're working and you're struggling to make ends meet, and gradually television takes over their attention and social media takes on. How do you bring it back now? How do you get them back? Well, one way to do so is to talk to the children about your desire to find that attachment with them. Because when you talk to them about your desire to be attached to them and connected to them, you may find that they also have the same desire, but they didn't know how to talk about it or how to explain it to you. Or they may have felt it, but not even know what it was called. Because even when they are connected to all these social media, they can still be lonely, because being attached to people that don't care about you is not real attachment. But being attached to somebody who loves you and is committed to your well-being makes a huge difference. So first of all, talk to them about your desire to form an attachment and see how they feel and listen to how they respond. Go ahead.
Okay, now another part of that is with this pandemic.
Yes.
Everybody is at home. Parents are working from home.
Yes.
So is there an advice for parents as to how they can try to, it's really very difficult. Yes. Because they're working and they're watching their children at the same time. Yes. After a while, they need a break from the children. And that's probably the time they should be building that kind of relationship. Yes. So I don't envy parents today, parents of young children. Yes. So is there any suggestion as to how they can really pattern their lives so that they can still have that quality time with the children without the TV and everything else around it?
Yes, you've put the nail on the head there, because you recognize the great difficulty that we are in because of the pandemic. More and more people are working from home, and at first it sounded great. Oh, I don't have to travel. I can be at home. I don't have to spend so long getting ready. But then the downside of it is now that the work takes over your life. And from the time you wake up to the time you go to sleep, your boss can be demanding things from you. So even when you're working from home, you need to make boundaries of when you will start and when you will stop, so that your work time and your family time is different and separate. Now, many schools were closed during the same time, and some parents had to try and homeschool their children and work at the same time. And it was nearly impossible. Either the children's education suffered or their work suffered, and it was just a time of great stress. So when the work was finished, I suppose those parents just wanted the children to get out of my way, go watch television now, because I am fed up of work and you all together. So those were very, very unusual circumstances. And in those times, I suppose, even if you carve out half an hour at the end of the day when you switch your work computer off and turn your attention to the children, that will make a difference. But hopefully this situation will not last indefinitely, and the schools will eventually fully open. And then when you see your children, you'll be able to miss them because they've been away, even though you may still continue working from home, as many people are doing. So yes, there's lots of competition for this attachment, but it's so important, and we have to recognize it and when we find it slipping, we need to try and bring it back. And then the second thing that children need is freedom and autonomy. That is, the ability to explore their growing world safely. They'll be able to go to a park and play a game, but still feel safe because their parents are watching them from a safe distance. Or go into the kitchen and pick up a knife and try and make some food, but the children are giving them proper instructions of how to use the kitchen tools. So they have a bit of freedom of how to learn, go into the garden or play in the water if you're near the sea or a river, because some children's lives are so structured and so regimented that they have no such thing as free time just to relax and enjoy and follow their ideas. But as children, we need free time so we can exercise our own creativity, to make some choices, and even have the freedom to make some mistakes, and then have those mistakes acknowledged and guided back to a better way. Freedom to express their preferences. Some parents don't give children any choices at all. They just tell them what to do and tell them what to say and tell them what to believe, and don't even ask them questions about what do you think or what do you like or what you don't like. And children need to have the freedom to explore the consequences of using the word yes and using the word no, and when to use it and when not to use it, and what happens when you use it in the wrong way, in the wrong place. When you say no to your parents, when you should say yes, and when you say yes to your friends, when you should say no. And all these things, they need to be guided. So they need to have safety, someone looking out for them, but enough freedom to try out things in a safe environment. And that leads us on to the third thing, which is children need to be able to play. There is this thing called fun, and it's very difficult to define what fun is. But fun is the ability for children to engage spontaneously in some activity that they really enjoy doing, just for the sake of enjoyment. Whether that is a game or exercise or art or crafts or conversation or laughter or comedy, just something that they enjoy, or music or singing, but they need to be able to spontaneously do something they really enjoy. Because if they don't do that, they'll grow up and become adults who don't know how to enjoy themselves. And there are so many adults whose life is so hard and so regimented and so filled with toil that when they put their tools down and they rest, they don't know how to enjoy themselves anymore. They go on holiday and they don't know what to do because they have never learned to play. And so it's so important. And even if, when I was a child, my parents were very regimented. Everything must be useful and constructive. And I used to love drawing. And my father thought drawing was foolishness. You need to do maths and English, study something that you can get a job. Drawing is foolishness. And now I'm 59 years old and I still love drawing. Sometimes I get children's coloring books and some crayons and I sit down and I love coloring in. Get a nice picture and just choose the colors and just carefully coloring all the little things. And that gives me so much pleasure. And every time I do it, I remember I missed this when I was a child. I wasn't allowed to play and have fun and just follow my dreams. And somewhere inside of myself, I believe I am an artist, even though I never had a chance to develop it. But one day I'm going to put an easel up and buy some paints and start painting just to see what will happen. And we will see. I said that to my daughter the other day. She studied art at school. And I said, Abigail, I am an artist, but I've never discovered it yet. And I'm going to start painting and we will see what happens. Because somewhere inside of us, there is a desire to be creative. And children need that. And the fourth thing is children need realistic boundaries. They need to know thus far and no further. And it's for their own good, not to restrict them, but to bless them. One of my brothers used to be a sports coach. So he used to work with young children, not very young, about 12 to 15 years old, and do different types of sporting activities, football and basketball and baseball and so on. And one day he decided to do an experiment. So he went out onto the field and there he had footballs, he had basketballs, he had equipment, cricket bats and balls, and a great variety of activities the children could do. So he said to them, instead of me telling you what game to play today, I'm going to give you freedom. You can do whatever you want. You can take a ball or a bat, you can make a team or you can play by yourself. You can kick the ball in any direction you want. Just do whatever you want. So he put all the equipment in the field and said, do whatever you like. So the children picked up one thing and started playing, but other children were not playing their game. They were doing something else. And every child started randomly doing different things. And eventually, after about 15 minutes, the children got frustrated with the lack of structure. And they just sat down on the floor, waited for him to tell them what to do, waited for him to form a team. Because sometimes too much freedom and no boundaries and no rules just creates confusion and frustration. And some children, their parents gave them so much freedom that they began to feel unsafe. If you're a certain age and your parent says, you can go to this shop, which is a certain distance away, but you can't go any further, then you get a sense of safety. I'm safe up to this point. When I get older, I can go a little bit further. But suppose you said to a 6-year-old when they go, you can go wherever you want, as far as you like. At first, that feels like a wonderful, privilege. I can do whatever I want. But the further away they go from their parents, the more unsafe they feel and the more vulnerable they become. And the more they begin to wish that they had boundaries. I grew up in an area in England where there was a lot of crime and there was stabbings, there was muggings, there was shootings. Police were involved all the time. And my father locked us up in the house. We go to school, come straight home, no evening activities outside the house. You stay and stay out of trouble. And I grew up feeling quite restricted because all my friends seemed to have unlimited freedom in the night to do all kinds of criminal activities, which they said was great fun. And then we grew up and we left home and I went to university and they did their jobs. And about 20 years later, I met up with some of my friends. And to my surprise, many of them had died. They had been stabbed or wounded or poisoned or overdosed with drugs or imprisoned. And the few that remained, I caught up with them. One of them was a young man who I longed to be with when I was a child. He was like my role model because every Monday when he came to school, he had all kinds of fantastic adventure stories of what he did over the weekend. They're usually criminal activities, but they sounded so exciting. And I felt so restricted listening to him and wished that I could be free like him, But 20 years later, when I got back and I met up with him, to my surprise, because he used to laugh at me every Monday when I said I'm not allowed to go out in the evening. To my surprise, 20 years later, he said to me, Paul, I wish I had a father like yours. I said, why? You used to laugh at me because I got locked up in the night and could only come out during the day. And he said to me, well, if you hear a knock on your front door in your house, what do you do? I said, well, I go down and open the door to see who it is. I said to him, what do you do? He says, I take my gun and my dog and I go up and I look out of the window to see who it is. I said, why? He said, because I have so many enemies. You're free, you got no enemies. So you can go to the door unarmed and open the door and see who it is. So I wish I had a father like you who had restricted me, because I wouldn't have made so many mistakes. So these are the 4 basic things that young people need. They need a secure attachment. They need freedom and autonomy. They need spontaneity and play. And they need realistic boundaries. And once you are aware of this, you can then begin to see which ones did I do and which ones did I fail to do. And even if your children are teenagers and you realize that in one of those 4 areas there was a gap, there was something missing, it's not too late to start filling it in now. You know, if your child had insecure attachment when they were young, and sometimes these attachments become insecure because the parents have an insecure relationship with each other. Sometimes parents split up and get divorced or separated, and that makes the child feel insecurely attached, because when one of the parents leaves the family home, the children don't say, oh, dad left mom. They say, dad left me. Or if the mother leaves and they stay with their father, they don't say mom left dad. They say mom left us. So whatever happens in the relationship of the adults, the children feel it as if it happened to them. Sometimes bereavement causes a lack of secure attachment, because a child may be really attached to one parent and looking forward to that parent seeing them develop and grow, and then that parent may die. And then suddenly their whole life changes. They may get a step parent who doesn't like them, or they may be sent to an auntie who they don't get along with, or their whole life changes and they no longer want to attach to anybody, because the one that they attached to, they lost. And so in order to protect themselves from that feeling of loss, they avoid attaching again to anybody else. And that's good to help you to protect from the feeling of loss. But the downside of it is that the same thing we do to protect ourselves from a feeling of loss also protects us from love and stops other people from getting close enough to us to love us. So sometimes when we become adults, we have become so protective because of the losses that we sustained in our childhood, that now we won't let anybody close enough to love us and for us to love them. And so we maintain our detachment and we become more and more lonely in our lives. But even at that stage, attachments can still be formed. And if your children have suffered different types of attachments, you can help them by, first of all, talking to them about attachment, about how they felt when these people who were close to them left. Because very often when bereavements or loss or divorce or separations happen in an adult's life, very often we don't ask the children how they feel about this. We just manage our adult affairs, and when they are settled, we just bring the children into whatever remains and we try and carry on. And very often we don't say to the children, how did you cope with this? How did you feel about this? What did it feel like when this person left? And then you need to reassure them it's not because of you. It's not your fault why they left. Don't take it personally. You know, they still love you. Even if we can't get along, I still love you and your dad still loves you, because they take everything personally. And sometimes even just something simple like that can make a years of detachment start to heal when they realize it wasn't my fault. You know, sometimes when children hear adults arguing, they listen carefully. And the reason why they listen is to see if in the argument they hear their name. And there's nothing worse than children hearing a traumatic argument going on in another part of the house. And somewhere in those argumentative words, they hear their name in the middle of it. Because immediately they think they're arguing about me, it's my fault. If I wasn't there, they wouldn't be arguing. And some children run away from home because they hear their name in arguments, thinking that if I go away, the arguments will stop. It was almost like Jonah when he was in the boat and there was a great storm and everybody was trying to quell the storm. And Jonah said, it's my fault why there is a storm. If you throw me out of the boat, the storm will cease. Some children feel like that, that my parents are always arguing about me. If I just leave, maybe they'll just stop arguing. And so they run away from home thinking that it was their fault, and it wasn't their fault. And so if you talk about those things with the children, we can start healing the disconnectedness. Because when children are disconnected, they don't allow their friends to get close enough to them to form good friendships. And so they drift through life feeling lonely all the time. Even when they're in a crowd of people that they know, they still feel lonely because no one understands how they feel. So these things can still be repaired even at the last minute. Don't think that because it wasn't done when they were young, it's too late. You can address things at every stage in someone's life. And the best way to begin is to ask them how they feel about certain things and listen to them. Now, when you listen, it's so important to listen with a non-judgmental, because sometimes parents, when they listen to children, they listen with fear because they feel that somewhere in what the children have to say is going to be blame, and they are to blame and they did it wrong, and they don't want to hear that from their own children because it's too late. You can't go back into their childhood and repeat it again. And so parents listen on the edge of their chairs, hoping that they won't be blamed for what has gone wrong in the child's life, ready to justify and explain and pass the blame. But avoid that temptation and just listen. Listen as if you were the child. The ability to listen is so crucial, so intrinsic in being able to help a child. And if you listen, and even if you feel blame, don't react. And even if you think what they're saying is wrong, don't judge them there and then. Just listen and hear them out. And even if you're shocked by what they say, don't show shock. Otherwise, they will stop talking. But just listen and hear them and pray for the ability to be calm and understanding. Get on the same page as them. Try and look at the world through their point of view. Ask questions like, how does that feel like for you? What is it like for you being in your world? Our children have a world to deal with that we never had to deal with. Their world is more complicated than ours was. So we need to ask questions in order to understand their worldview. And I went to, when my children were younger, when they were 11 and they were going to their high schools, I went along with one of my children to a high school introduction where all the parents gathered together in a big hall and the head teacher gave a speech to all the parents about helping our children to choose the right careers for them. And he made a very interesting point. He said, every parent wants their child to be a doctor or a lawyer, but we need more things in this world than doctors and lawyers. And in fact, he said, many of the careers that your children will be doing when they leave school have not even been invented yet. So you can't even advise them about their future because their future is changing faster than you can think. And I remember when I was at school, there was no such thing as the internet. So if I were to say to my father when I was a child, I want to be an internet web designer, I would be talking nonsense to him because that didn't even exist. Our children are looking at a world which is changing so fast that much of what they had to contend with didn't even exist when we were children. And I know we have this big, strong compulsion to guide and to instruct and to tell them. But sometimes we need to humble ourselves and listen to them. Try and look at the world through their eyes. You know, there was so much injustice in this world, you know, political injustice, racial injustice, gender inequality, not to mention a growing level of confusion about gender and sexuality, that they all have to continually manage in this new and changing politically correct world. And there are certain things that we can't even say anymore unless we want our children to be taken away from us by social services. And in that world, we have to guide our children. And we need to start that guiding process by listening. Because it's a two-way street. When we're dealing with children, we need to teach as much as we learn from them. We have experience and knowledge and ethics and morals and wisdom, but they have current knowledge of what is going on in the world right now. And so when we're dealing with our children, we need to be quick to listen and slow to speak and slow to get angry, because we will cut them off. And we need to validate their experience. We need to empathize with them. Tell them that we understand what they're saying. And if we don't understand, say, I'd love to understand. Tell me how it feels. What is it like? You know, when you hear these words, what goes through your mind? How does it feel to be confused like this? You know, and listen and say, Lord, help me to see the world through their eyes. And when you begin to see the world through their eyes, then they can see that you can see. And when they see that you can see, then they will begin to open up. And one of the things we have to do while you're listening is manage strong emotions. Because we as parents, we have strong emotions. We want to protect. We want to save them from suffering. We want to guide them. We want to stop them from making mistakes. You know, we have strong feelings of guilt if we feel that we have failed in some way to help them to be prepared for life. And we have strong feelings of blame. And sometimes the husband blames the wife, or the wife blames the husband for how the children have turned out. But we have to put those strong emotions aside if we are going to listen and be able to help our children. And we need to be non-judgmental and unconditional in our love. So often, you know, we read in the Bible about unconditional love, but we actually practice with our children conditional love, because we show love and favor to them if they behave in a way that pleases us. And if they don't behave in a way that pleases us, our disapproval feels like we have stopped loving them to them. And when we give them the cold shoulder because we're so annoyed we can't speak, or when we cut off their privileges, all they feel is that I didn't do what they wanted me to do, so they've stopped loving me now. And so we need to explain, we need to talk. So even in the middle of a punishment, we need to explain to them that this punishment is love, because it is because I love you why I want to help you to change your ways, so that they don't feel that, you know, when I'm good, I am loved. When I am not good, the love stops, because that makes them very insecure and teaches them to love other people in the same way. And then people will go into their marriages and say, I will love you as long as you make me happy, or I will love you as long as you are beautiful, or I will love you as long as you keep loving me. And if we have this conditional love, we'll be passing conditional love over to the next generation and weakening their lives and their marriages. So be in the children's lives, our young people's lives, our teenagers' lives, and listen and ask questions, and ask open questions. Don't say, why did you do this, or what does this mean? Ask questions like, how does this feel? Or tell me more about that. Or help me to understand what it's like to be there, and give them time to open and explain. And as you do that, they will begin to share their world with you, and you will then be able to connect with them in such a way that you will be able to help them, because they need us. Even though there are many things about their life that we don't understand, there is one thing that never changes: our emotions. Anger, happiness, sadness, shame, guilt, remorse, fear, they are the same in every generation. And we have more experience in managing those strong emotions. So as much as they have new knowledge of this changing world, they need us because we have wisdom and experience of how these big emotions come through and pass through our lives. When they have their first romantic encounter and they get dumped by their boyfriend or their girlfriend, and they feel that life is over, and it really does feel like it's over for them. We as adults who have been through that maybe more than a few times can hold them and say, it's okay. This too will pass. You will not die from this. And maybe when they start to go through these things, then you can share with them that you went through similar things too, and you survived. And then when they realize that you have also lived in the real world like they live, and you felt some of these strong emotions that they're feeling, they may want to learn more from you. You know, my father, for example, he used to teach us from the scriptures and give us much instruction. And in order to try and make himself an example for us, he used to tell us stories about his childhood, which made him out to be quite a good child. And one of the things he was telling us about, you know, women and growing up and finding a partner, he said to us that he only had 2 girlfriends in his entire life. The first girlfriend he had died because she had a kidney problem, and the second girlfriend was our mother. And that was it. That's all he told us. So when I grew up and I began to have relationships with young women, and I was struggling, and they were complicated, and I couldn't understand these women, I thought to myself, I can't go to my father because he has no experience. He only had 2 girlfriends, and the second one was my mother, and the first one died. So he's no use to me. So I took advice from all kinds of friends, which was bad advice most of the time. But with prayer and some guidance, I made it through this minefield of trial and error and found a good woman and married. And later on, I went to the Caribbean, where my father grew up, to his island. And I met his brother, his older brother, whose name was Aubrey. And I said, Uncle Aubrey, tell me about my dad. Did he really only have 2 girlfriends? And Aubrey burst out laughing. He said, no, 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 no. Let me tell you. And he took me down the road and he introduced me to at least a dozen women, dozen old ladies. And he said, this one, and this one, and this one, and this one. They were all lovely old ladies. And every time they heard that I was Victor's son, they would give me a big hug and a big kiss and say, go, when you go home, give Victor a kiss for me. And I was happy and amused and sad at the same time. I was happy and amused because I thought to myself, I don't know why he was hiding this, because there's nothing to be ashamed of. But I was sad because I thought to myself, if I only knew that my father had had so much experience, I would have gone to him for advice. But I didn't know. So let children know that you've lived. You don't need to tell them every mistake you have made, but tell them something so that they know that you have had a life. You have passed through a wide range of emotions and you understand something, so that when they have problems, they will see you as a fountain of knowledge because you have lived. So don't be afraid to enter into their world and allow them to enter into parts of your world that you can share with them as an object lesson. And by doing all these things, you'll be moving step by step closer to developing that relationship with your young people. And even if you haven't done it before, it is not too late to start now because they still need you. So we have a couple of minutes before this room ends. We have time for questions. Do you have any questions or comments?
Pastor, thank you so much for your presentation. I love that story that you gave about your father. I just wanted to know, I think I realized that I personally don't have any children, but I just came here because I thought it was so interesting. So I just wanted to know, I think our parents sometimes have a fear of not being seen as parents, I guess, and they want to maintain the image that they have of being, of walking the straight and narrow,
Yeah.
and never wanting to give us a different image.
Yeah.
And then there are some parents, and it blows my mind, there are some parents that I saw that give a little bit more freedom to their children than I know of the strict Caribbean parents, and was a little bit more open with their children, and their children actually end up better than the other strict parents. And I think they have the concept of being your child's friend.
Yeah.
What is the good balance
Yes, that's
between?
a very, very good question. And that's a really difficult thing to balance, because even in the same family, the balance needs to be different for each child.
Wow.
Because you have to balance these things. On the one extreme, you don't want your children to use your mistakes as an excuse to go and do the same. Okay, well, you did it, so I can do the same. You don't want that. But on the other hand, you don't want to appear to them to be so perfect that they can't share the fact with you that they have made mistakes.
Yes.
And so you need to pray for the wisdom to know with each child how to draw the boundary and how and when to share which parts of your experience. And I do that all the time. I have 2 daughters, and I speak to each one differently, because they have a completely different perception of life and thinking in a very different way. One of my daughters is very black and white. It's either wrong, right, or wrong. You should have done this, or you should not have done that. The other daughter says, yes, actually, life is complicated. I can see this, And so you have to work with them where they are and pray. James 1 verse 5 says, if anyone lacks wisdom, let him ask. And this is not a human thing. You need the wisdom of God, because we have an adversary who is fighting to destroy our children. And so we need to have that right balance between wisdom and parental guidance, so we can safely say to the children, follow me. We also need to be close enough for them to feel that we are a friend, so they can confide in us and tell us their secrets and their failures and their mistakes. They also need to know that we have made enough mistakes in our life, even if they don't need to know exactly what those mistakes were, but we made enough so that they will know that they will be understood when they speak to us.
Question I had was, we don't have any children yet, but hopefully we will be blessed with some. Now, the question I have is, how do you argue constructively? How do you demonstrate arguing constructively? Yeah.
Yes, that's a really important point. How do you argue constructively? Well, first of all, you don't identify the person you are arguing with as the problem. What you do is you imagine that the problem is a third person in the room. So imagine there's 2 of you in the room and you're having an argument about something. Treat that argument as a third entity and say to the person that you're arguing with, okay, we're having a problem. Let's put our heads together and try and solve this problem. So make the thing that you are arguing about, the problem that you're struggling with, into an issue that you are both going to work together to try and solve. So rather than the argument being you against me, which means one of us is going to win and one of us is going to lose. And sometimes we win arguments by putting each other down, and that only loses the argument because it destroys the relationship. What we need to do is say, okay, we're not agreeing about this, but I want to find a way that we'll both be happy with. So can we put our heads together and try and solve this problem? And then the problem is treated as the separate issue. And then the solving of the problem brings you together. But very often we get emotional. And when we get emotional, we attack and we defend. And then we get into a 3-stage cycle. Stage 1 is, who's to blame for this? It's your fault. No, it's my fault. Why? I did this and you did this. And then when you're in the stage 1 part of the argument, whoever has the best memory will win. So I don't argue with my wife because she has a much better memory than me about every single thing that happened in the last 20 years. And I can't cope with that. So I don't have historical arguments at all because my memory is not that sharp historically. But then that's stage one, who's to blame? And then stage two is, pursue and withdraw. Eventually somebody is going to start losing the argument so badly. They want to either stop talking, cut out from the argument, or even try and leave the room. And then the person who has not finished is going to follow them. I haven't finished with you yet. You need to hear the rest of this. And so you move into second stage, pursue and withdraw. And then if that carries on for too long, you get into the third stage, which is a damaging stage, which is, indifference. You close down and you shield yourself with indifference by saying, you know what, I don't care anymore. Say whatever you want. I don't care. It doesn't matter. And when you get to that indifferent stage, now the relationship is in deep trouble. And you can avoid going through all of those three stages by treating the problem as a separate thing from the person, and then putting your heads together to try and solve it. And when you do that, that enables you to depersonalize the problem and helps to get the problem solved without fighting against each other. God bless you.
Thank
you
you
so much,
Thank you
Pastor.
very much.
Thank you for your attention.
All right.
Take care.
Bye.